7 years. That's how long this loyal K9 had been separated from the only man he ever trusted. But when fate finally brought them together, no one expected what happened next. Imagine losing the one who saved your life, the one who stood by your side in the most dangerous moments, and then reuniting years later, only to realize they no longer recognize you. That's exactly what happened when Officer James finally came face to face with his former partner, Rex, a highly trained police K9 who had gone blind after years of service. As the officer approached, his heart pounded. Rex, once a fearless protector, now sat still, his cloudy eyes staring into nothingness. No sign of recognition, no reaction, just silence. Had time erased their bond? Had his once loyal friend truly forgotten him? Then, just as hope began to fade, Rex did something so unexpected, so powerful, that it left everyone in the room in tears. What happened next will break you, and it will prove, once and for all, that true loyalty never dies. Stay with us until the end, because this story is about to take a turn no one saw coming. For 5 years, Officer James and Rex were more than just partners. They were brothers in arms. From the bustling city streets to the darkest alleys, they fought crime together, saved lives together, and stood between danger and the innocent. Rex wasn't just any K9. He was a legend. Trained from a young age, he had an uncanny ability to sense threats before they happened. His instincts were razor-sharp, his loyalty unbreakable. He had taken down armed criminals, sniffed out explosives, and even pulled James from the wreckage of a burning vehicle when a high-speed chase ended in disaster. But their bond wasn't built just on missions and duty. It was built on love. At the end of each long shift, James would sit on the station steps, and Rex would rest his head on his knee. No words were needed. Their connection was something deeper than language, something forged in trust, sacrifice, and countless life-or-death moments. Then everything changed. It was supposed to be a routine call, a suspected drug hideout, a quick in-and-out operation. James and Rex had done this dozens of times before. But this time, something was different. As they approached the building, Rex's ears perked up, his body stiffening. James knew that look. Rex had sensed something. A trap. But before James could react, a deafening explosion ripped through the air. Flames. Smoke. Screams. James was thrown backward, his vision blurred, ears ringing. And then silence. When he finally gathered himself, he saw Rex lying motionless in the debris. Blood stained his fur. His body barely moved. Panic surged through James as he stumbled toward his partner. "Hang on, buddy. Stay with me," Rex whimpered, his breathing shallow, his once sharp eyes clouded with pain. Paramedics arrived, pulling James away as they rushed Rex into emergency care. Hours later, the news came. The explosion had left Rex permanently blind. The department deemed him unfit for duty. Just like that, his career was over. James fought. He argued. He begged to adopt Rex, to give him the retirement he deserved. But policies were policies, and Rex was sent to a special K9 retirement facility far away. James never got to say a proper goodbye. One day, Rex was his partner. The next, he was gone. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and slowly, months stretched into years. James never stopped thinking about him. Did he ever adjust? Did he miss him? Did he even remember the bond they had once shared? Then, 7 years later, a call changed everything. A voice on the other end of the line. "Officer James, we have something you need to see." James's heart pounded. Could it be? It turned out that Rex, now old and frail, was in his final days. His body was tired, but he still held on to something no one could explain. Every single day, he would sit by the door of the facility, ears perked as if waiting for someone. The staff didn't understand it. Rex had long lost his sight, and most of his fellow retired K9s had adjusted to their new lives. But not Rex. It was as if he was holding on to something unfinished. That's when they decided to reach out to James. And now, after 7 long years, he was about to see his partner again. But there was one terrifying thought in his mind. Would Rex still remember him? Or had time erased everything they once had? James stepped into the facility, his hands trembling. Across the room, in a quiet corner, lay an old German shepherd, his fur now peppered with gray, his body thinner, slower. James took a deep breath. Rex, no movement, no reaction. James took another step. Buddy, it's me. Rex's ears twitched. His nose lifted slightly. He sniffed the air, but still, there was hesitation. James's heart ached. Then, in one final attempt, James did something only the two of them would understand. He whistled a soft, familiar whistle, the one he used every single night when their shift ended. For a moment, nothing happened. And then, Rex lifted his head. His ears shot up. His tail it twitched. The room held its breath. And then, Rex sprang to his feet. A deep, desperate whimper escaped him as he stumbled forward, his blind eyes searching for the man he had been waiting for all these years. James dropped to his knees just as Rex crashed into him, his old body trembling with emotion. He buried his face into James's chest, whining, licking, pawing at him, as if trying to convince himself that this was real. Tears streamed down James's face. Hey, buddy. I'm here. I never forgot you. And in that moment it was clear. Rex never forgot either. James knelt on the cold tile floor, his arms wrapped around Rex, as the old K9 trembled with emotion. It had been 7 long years, but for Rex, it was as if no time had passed. He whimpered, his head pressing firmly against James's chest, his tail wagging weakly, but with unmistakable joy. The staff at the facility stood in stunned silence. They had never seen anything like this. Most retired K9s adjusted to their new lives, some even forgetting their former handlers. But not Rex. Even without his sight, even after all these years, he knew. James ran his fingers through Rex's fur, now coarse and streaked with gray. Hey, buddy. I missed you, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Rex let out a soft huff, his nose twitching as he took in James's scent, the scent that had been missing from his life for so long. The moment was overwhelming, a silent confirmation of the bond that had never truly broken. James thought back to all the years they had spent together, every mission, every late-night patrol, every quiet moment when it was just the two of them. He remembered how Rex would nudge his hand whenever he sensed James was stressed, how he would stand in front of him protectively even when there was no danger, how he had once dragged James out of harm's way when a suspect pulled a gun on them. Rex had saved his life more times than James could count. And now, James was here to return the favor. I'm not leaving you again, boy, he promised, rubbing behind Rex's ears the way he always had. The K9 let out a content sigh, his body finally relaxing for the first time in years. The facility director cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Rex has been waiting for this, Officer James. We didn't know if he'd make it much longer, but he was holding on for something. I think it was you. James swallowed hard, his chest tightening. He looked into Rex's clouded eyes, knowing that time had stolen his sight, but not his heart. Can I take him outside? James asked. The staff nodded, stepping aside as James gently helped Rex to his feet. The old dog wobbled for a moment before steadying himself. Even in his weakened state, he leaned against James, as if drawing strength from him. They walked slowly through the facility's front doors and into the crisp autumn air. The sun was warm against their skin and fur, the scent of fallen leaves filling the air. James led Rex to a grassy patch, just like the ones they used to take breaks on between shifts. For a moment, Rex just stood there, nose lifted, taking it all in. Then, something incredible happened. Rex let out a soft bark, not one of alarm, but of recognition. He took a hesitant step forward, then another, his movements becoming more confident. His tail, weak but determined, wagged slightly. Even without his sight, he knew where he was. James could barely contain his emotions. "That's right, buddy. We used to do this every day." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something he had kept all these years, a small, worn-out rubber ball. It was Rex's favorite toy, one he had refused to part with during his time on the force. James held it up. "You remember this?" Rex's ears perked. He let out a small, excited huff. James rolled the ball a few feet away. Rex hesitated, then slowly padded forward, using his nose to track it down. When he found it, he let out a satisfied grunt, picked it up gently in his jaws, and turned back toward James. Tears welled up in James's eyes. "Good boy, Rex. You're still my good boy." They spent the next hour outside, reliving old habits, sitting together in the quiet comfort they had once known so well. James knew that Rex didn't have much time left. His body was tired, his movements slow. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was that Rex knew he wasn't forgotten. What mattered was that he had found his way back to the person he had waited for all these years. James made a decision right then and there. "I'm taking him home," he said firmly. "He deserves to be with family." The facility director nodded. "We were hoping you'd say that." That evening, James lifted Rex gently into the passenger seat of his truck, just like he had done so many times before. The old dog settled in, letting out a deep, content sigh. As James drove, he reached over and rested a hand on Rex's head. "Let's go home, partner." And, for the first time in 7 years, Rex truly rested, knowing he was finally where he belonged. The drive home was quiet, save for the soft hum of the engine and the rhythmic rise and fall of Rex's breathing. James glanced over at his old partner, curled up on the seat beside him. The once vibrant K9, who had spent years sprinting through alleys and leaping over obstacles, now lay still, his body frail but his spirit unbroken. James reached over, his fingers brushing against Rex's coarse fur. "Almost home, buddy," he whispered. Rex's ears twitched slightly. Even in his old age, even without his sight, he still recognized the familiar tone of his best friend's voice. But deep inside, James couldn't shake a gnawing fear. Was this their final ride together? James pulled into his driveway, stepping out and carefully lifting Rex from the truck. The dog was lighter than before, his body worn from years of waiting, but he still nuzzled into James's arms, as if finding comfort in his touch. As they stepped inside, James lowered Rex onto a soft dog bed near the fireplace, the same spot where he used to curl up after a long shift. The house still smelled the same, filled with traces of James's scent, the faint aroma of wood polish, and the lingering memory of days long gone. Rex lifted his head slightly, his nose twitching. He let out a small, satisfied sigh. He knew this place. James knelt beside him, running his hand gently along Rex's side. "I told you I'd come back for you," he murmured. Rex responded with a faint wag of his tail. As the evening wore on, James noticed something. Rex was struggling to keep his eyes open. His breaths were slower, deeper, as if each one took just a little more effort. James swallowed the lump forming in his throat. He knew. This wasn't just exhaustion. This wasn't just old age catching up. This was Rex letting go. "Hey, stay with me," James said softly, his voice breaking. "We just got home." Rex let out a soft groan, shifting slightly to press his head against James's knee. He wasn't in pain. He wasn't afraid. He was just tired. James sat there, stroking Rex's fur, remembering everything. He remembered their first training session together, the way Rex had been so eager to please, how he had outperformed every other dog in the unit. He remembered their first real mission, when Rex had found a missing child in the woods, refusing to give up until he led them to her. He remembered the night Rex had saved his life, lunging at a suspect who had drawn a weapon before James even had a chance to react. And he remembered the day they were forced to part. He had promised himself that he would find a way to bring Rex home. But life got in the way. Paperwork, policies, deployments, things James couldn't control. But now, none of that mattered. James blinked rapidly, trying to push back the emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "I should have come sooner," he whispered. Rex let out a soft grunt, almost as if to say, "You're here now. That's all that matters." The clock on the wall ticked softly, filling the silence. The fire crackled gently, casting a warm glow over the room. James felt Rex's breathing slow even further. Too slow. His heart clenched. He knew this moment would come, but not this soon. Not now. James leaned down, resting his forehead against Rex's. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "If you're tired, it's okay." Rex let out a soft exhale, a sound of peace, of finality. James felt the shift before he even realized it. The rise and fall of Rex's chest stopped. The warmth beneath James's hand began to fade. The silence that followed was deafening. James clenched his jaw, his eyes squeezing shut as a deep, shattering grief washed over him. Rex was gone. For a long time, James didn't move. He just sat there, his hand still resting on Rex's fur, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His best friend, his partner, his hero was gone. But then something strange happened. A breeze drifted through the open window, carrying with it the scent of autumn leaves. The fire crackled slightly, casting flickering shadows on the wall. And in that moment, James felt it a presence. Rex might have left this world, but the bond they shared, the love, the loyalty, it would never fade. James wiped his eyes, swallowing back the sorrow threatening to consume him. He looked down at his partner one last time and smiled through the tears. "Rest easy, boy," he whispered. "You did good." And with that he knew Rex was finally home. James sat in silence, his hand still resting on Rex's now motionless body. The warmth that once pulsed beneath his fingers was fading, replaced by an unbearable emptiness. His chest tightened, his breath unsteady. He had braced for this moment, but nothing could prepare him for the raw, crushing weight of losing his best friend. Then a sound, a faint, almost imperceptible whimper. James's head snapped up, his breath caught in his throat. His eyes darted to Rex, searching desperately for movement. But the dog lay still. Maybe he had imagined it. Maybe his grief was playing tricks on him. But then it happened again. A soft, strained whine, followed by the tiniest twitch of Rex's paw. James's heart slammed against his ribs. Was this real? He leaned forward, his hands shaking, pressing gently against Rex's ribcage. For a moment there was nothing. No breath, no heartbeat. But then a shallow inhale. James's eyes widened. No way. His training kicked in. If there was even the slightest chance, he had to act. He placed his hand on Rex's side, feeling for the weak but undeniable rhythm of life. It was faint, almost non-existent, but it was there. Rex was still holding on. James scrambled for his phone, dialing the nearest emergency vet. His voice was hoarse, urgent. "I need help. My dog, he stopped breathing, but I think he's still here. Please, tell me what to do." The voice on the other end was calm but serious. "Keep him warm. Check his airways. We'll be ready when you get here." James wasted no time. He wrapped Rex in the blanket he had since his puppy days, lifted him into his arms, and rushed to the truck. "Hang in there, buddy," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're not done yet." The drive to the vet was a blur, a mix of desperate prayers, stolen glances at the bundle of fur beside him, and the unshakable fear that time was running out. The clinic doors burst open as James ran inside, Rex cradled in his arms. A team of vets rushed to his side, taking him from James's grasp and disappearing into the back. And then silence. Minutes felt like hours. James paced the waiting room, his hands clenched into fists, his mind racing. Had he just witnessed a miracle, or was he only delaying the inevitable? Finally, the vet stepped forward, her expression unreadable. James braced himself. "Officer James," she said gently, "you might want to come see this." James followed her into the exam room, his heart pounding. Rex lay on a table, an oxygen mask over his snout, his chest rising, stronger now. The vet turned to James, her eyes full of something close to awe. It was a phenomenon called deep coma-like apnea. Sometimes, elderly dogs in distress can enter a state where their vitals slow down so much, it mimics passing away. But your voice, your presence, it triggered something in him. James swallowed hard, stepping closer. You're telling me he came back because of me? The vet nodded. He never truly left. He just needed to know you were there. Tears welled up in James's eyes. He reached out, running a trembling hand over Rex's head. Rex's tail gave a tiny, weak wag. James let out a choked laugh. You stubborn old dog. Rex, though tired, let out a soft huff, as if to say, you should know by now. I'd never leave you that easily. Against all odds, Rex had found his way back. James knelt beside Rex, his trembling hand resting on the dog's frail body. He had faced life and death moments before on duty, in the field, but nothing compared to this. This wasn't just a partner. This was his best friend. Rex's breathing was shallow, his once strong body weak from the years apart. James felt his throat tighten, his eyes burning. He had imagined this reunion 1,000 times, but never like this. Come on, buddy, James whispered, his voice breaking. You've made it this far. Then, something incredible happened. Rex's ears twitched. Barely. But it was enough. James held his breath as Rex's nose wiggled, as if searching for something. Recognition, familiarity him. And then Rex lifted his head. His clouded eyes didn't see, but he knew. He sniffed the air, his body shaking with effort. And when his nose found James's hand, a soft whimper escaped his throat. The same sound he had made all those years ago, when they were inseparable. James lost it. Tears streamed down his face. He cradled Rex's head in his hands, his forehead pressing against the dog's. I'm here, he sobbed. I never forgot you. Never. Rex let out a deep sigh, as if letting go of years of waiting, of longing. And then his tail wagged. James let out a broken laugh, his tears dripping onto Rex's fur. He could feel the unspoken words between them. I waited for you. I came back for you. The vet stood quietly nearby, her expression full of wonder. He fought for this moment, she murmured. For you? James nodded, brushing his fingers gently over Rex's ears. Then I'll fight for him. That night, James didn't leave Rex's side. As the moonlight streamed through the window, he whispered stories from their old days, of chasing bad guys, of long night shifts, of victories and close calls. And as Rex drifted into sleep, safe in the arms of the man he had never stopped loving, James knew one thing for certain. Some bonds never break. Some love never fades. And even after all these years, Rex had finally found his way home. Just as James thought the moment couldn't get any more emotional, the vet hesitated before speaking. There's something you should know, she said softly, looking at James with an unreadable expression. James frowned, still stroking Rex's fur. What is it? She took a deep breath. Rex wasn't just waiting. He was searching. James blinked. What? The vet reached for a worn, tattered collar sitting on a nearby tray. She turned it over, revealing something James never expected. His name, his address, the same old tag he had given Rex years ago. James's breath caught. But I thought this was lost when he was taken. The vet nodded. It was, but Rex never let it go. The shelter workers said he had been carrying this in his mouth for years, refusing to part with it. Like he knew one day he'd find you again. James clenched his jaw, emotions crashing over him like a tidal wave. All these years, all the suffering, and yet Rex had never given up hope. Tears welled in his eyes as he held the collar close. And in that moment, James realized the truth. He hadn't rescued Rex. Rex had saved himself just to see him again. James sat beside Rex, his fingers tracing the old collar, his heart overwhelmed by the weight of what had just unfolded. This wasn't just a reunion. It was proof of an unbreakable bond, a love that defied time, distance, and even memory loss. How many of us can say we've been this loyal? How many of us would search for someone, despite the odds, despite the years? Rex never forgot. Even when the world turned its back, he held on to hope. As James wrapped his arms around his old partner, Rex let out a soft whimper, a sound of comfort, of home. This story isn't just about a dog and his handler. It's about faith, dedication, the kind of love that never fades. So now I ask you, who in your life would never give up on you? And more importantly, who would you never give up on? If this story moved you, share it. Let others see what true loyalty looks like. Drop a red heart in the comments for Rex. And if you believe in the power of love and second chances, hit that subscribe button. More stories like this are coming. You won't want to miss them.